part 3 in this series, which I'm calling On Nations. And in this episode, I want to give just a couple of examples that have come to my attention. Some examples of some nations, and some examples of states, and some examples of territories, and that'll do. All right, and this helps me make sense of the fact that in all dictionaries worldwide, there is no one definition of nation. Okay, now I have come across the Navajo Nation, Native American nation, a genuine nation under all dictionary definitions I can find. It's got its own government. It's an area of land near the border of Utah, I think it is. If I get these wrong, it doesn't matter. New Mexico and Arizona. Now, if the Navajo Nation wasn't there, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona, I think it's those three, would meet at a point, along with one other state. So there'd be a bit of a crossroads. There's a lot of the states in America are on straight lines. Just like quite a few states here in Australia are. All right then. However, Navajo Nation is territory that takes in some of Utah and some of New Mexico and some of Arizona, if that's the three states. If it's not those three states, then three other states. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this episode. All right, we'll just say it's those three. Okay. So those three states don't all meet, without the Navajo Nation. The four states would all be bordering each other because they meet at a crossroads. The state line. But because of the Navajo Nation, each of those states meets only one of the other states, because the Navajo Nation is right in the middle there. So they've disrupted that. You can't get on your hands and knees and be in four states at once, as far as I can tell. All right. Now, the Navajo Nation is interesting. Just give me a sec. Because I think it's fair to say it's not in any of those states. It's separate. It's a separate territory, really. But it's not like the Northern Territory in Australia here. The Northern Territory here in Australia is not a state either, you see. The Navajo Nation is not a state in the United States of America. I'll explain that in a sec. All right. The Northern Territory here has I should know, not a governor, but an administrator, chief administrator, appointed by the federal government, as I understand it. Okay, so we call that a territory of the federal government. I think that's the way we put it. I'm sure the Northern Territory has got a fair bit of self-governance going in there as part of the deal, but that's basically it, All right. Now, that's the Northern Territory. But the Navajo Nation is not like that. It's got its own government, so it's a state, because anything with its own government is a state. So it's technically a state, I suppose, the Navajo Nation. But it's also a nation under, just look up a dictionary, it's a nation as well. Its leadership, I think, its government and its lawmakers are not appointed by the federal government over there. So it's not a territory in our understanding of a territory. It's still a nation. What else could you call it? It's a nation. It's not a territory. It's not a state in the same way that the states in the United States are states, because it's not one of those. The only thing you can call it is a nation. All right. Now, it's answerable to the federal government of the United States. Now that's interesting. Although I think it has nigh on tried to secede in the past and become an independent state. But I think you'd call it's kind of a dependent nation to a certain extent. It has to adhere to federal laws, but it adheres to no state laws. What do you want?
Around the corner, I have something you're going to present to me while I'm sitting.
All right. I'll be finished in a sec. I think the Navajo, well, I'd better finish. I think the Navajo Nation is a genuine nation under, I don't know what else you would call it. I don't think it's a state in the sense that the other states in the United States are states. It's technically a state probably because it's got its own government, but there seems to be absolute widespread agreement that it's a genuine nation. Now, I wonder if Pauline Hanson from here in Australia would be happy to call it a nation. I suspect she would. I think she's just concerned about the idea of pushing the idea of one nation here in Australia. If she was in the United States of America, she'd probably oppose the idea of the Navajo Nation being the Navajo Nation, but I don't think the United States is her concern. Here in Australia, she doesn't want anything like what's happening over there in the United States happening here. I'm pretty sure of it. Yeah, I'm certain of it. Neither does Andrew Bolt. But the Navajo Nation, or Navajo Nation, or Navajo Nation, I don't know how to pronounce it, is a nation. So what have you got there? You've got a federal government in the United States of America, centred in Washington, and answerable to that sets federal laws and provides a federal army and air force and space force and navy, but sort of semi-independent to that. You've got 52 states and also this nation, this other nation. I think there's some dependent territories too. There's that word again, territories. Islands and stuff like that, Puerto Rico, I don't know which ones they are. All right. But it's very interesting that under the umbrella, but not below it as such. I don't think the states in America see themselves as being lower than the federal government. They almost seem like they see themselves as sort of partners by agreement or something like that. Okay. And so the Navajo Nation, I don't think is lower than the nation of the United States of America. I don't think it's lower. I think it's in a deal with it. It's in a treaty. That's what it's in. And that's what Pauline Hanson doesn't want. She doesn't want any treaties here in Australia. She doesn't want to see any Navajo nations springing up here in Australia. She doesn't want to see a Yorta Nation or a Wurundjeri Nation or anything like that springing up here. I, however, would love it, even though I know that it would make messy the neat little scheme we've got going on here in Australia, and it would introduce issues of unification and all that sort of stuff. But nevertheless, philosophically, I'd love it if a Navajo Nation sprung up here. It wouldn't be called Navajo, of course. It'd be called, after one of the mobs here. Maybe it would be, as I say, the Wurundjeri Nation. I'd love it if the Wurundjeri Nation got its own little territory like the Navajo Nation have got over there in the US. Funny thing is, it'd probably be right. It'd probably take in the land that is marked out by Flinders Street, let's say Swanston Street, Latrobe Street, and Spring Street. Now, wouldn't that be funny if if the Wurundjeri Nation said, listen, that's where we want our Wurundjeri Nation. See, that's where it gets tricky. We've already taken all the good land. But philosophically, I'd love it if there arose here where I live, in this part of Australia, a Wurundjeri Nation. However, it'd be messy. But I'd like to see that, Anyway, thank you to the Navajo Nation for giving me a broader idea of what a nation is in the world, and all the different things that a nation can be in the world. There's more than 192 nations on Earth. There's something like 64,000 plus 192. Okay then, nations within nations, states within states. You've got to keep your mind loosey-goosey, and not be too locked down in your thinking, because in the dictionary there's multiple meanings of the word nation, and you've got to be a little bit flexible and fluid with your thinking to actually, otherwise you can't just open your dictionary and scratch out the meanings that you don't like. Oh yes, you can, if you're Pauline Hanson.